Are we set? Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for attending the inaugural meeting of the Task Force on Optimal Public Safety Answering Point Architecture. Today's weather, this is a first instance. I know some of you are desperate to cut through some of this weather, and you have plans, trains, flights, etc., that you would really like to be able to make. So we're going to try to move a pace here, and hopefully you guys can get where you need to go. A couple of other points of housekeeping. We're going to get to those who are called in via the conference bridge, but if we could ask you to mute your device or your phone or your desktop while things are going on, just because sometimes we get background noise or clicking. I am Tim May. I am in the Policy and Licensing Division of the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau, and I would like to introduce to you David Simpson, Chief of the Bureau, who has some remarks. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Tim. And let me follow up on the weather comment, and with apologies to Dana Wahlberg, who came in from Minnesota. It's not the actual weather that gets us excited here in D.C., it's the rumor of weather. And it's still life-threatening. So we very much want to be sensitive to travel schedules and or contingencies. If you got to go, and we'll know that you're going to follow up and stay engaged. Welcome to the inaugural meeting of the Task Force on Optimal Public Safety Answering Point Architecture. David Simpson, I'm the Bureau Chief of the FCC's Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau. And let me extend my appreciation to all of the task force members, both the ones that are here and the ones that are joining us over the phone, for committing your valuable time, your expertise, and the most important point, your energies to this important undertaking. Second, allow me to thank the leadership of the task force and the working groups for agreeing to serve. Our new chair really has been a lion throughout the public safety community, and I don't appreciate him for being a lion. I appreciate him from being a former maritime service friend. With Steve, spent some time in the Coast Guard. But Steve Stouter, director of the Fairfax County, Virginia Department of Public Safety, has agreed to chair the overall task force, and I don't think we could have a better person to look across the myriad needs, but at the end of the day know that if this doesn't work in PSAPs, we haven't done our job. Our vice chair, Dana Wahlberg from Minnesota, Department of Public Safety, and Dana has great experience not only in Minnesota with actually delivering forward-leaning technologies in their Next Generation 911 program, but also in working through NASNA and other multi-state events, understanding the challenges in other states, and that one size really doesn't fit all. Jay English from the Association of Public Safety Communications Officials, APCO, David Hall from the state of Pennsylvania, and representing the National Association of State 911 Administrators, and Phil Jones from the Washington State Utilities and Transportation Commission. We convene none too soon. Communication networks are migrating to newer technologies, and consumer habits are changing. Our challenge and duty, however, have not changed. We must make sure that Americans' access to critical life-saving services, most notably 911 service, is preserved and, where possible, improved. For the over 6,500 PSAPs operating across the United States, whether a large-scale regional operation or a two-seat call center, this is an incredibly challenging task. IP-based services, Internet Protocol-based services, will enable PSAPs to integrate their communications more efficiently between citizens' calls for help and the first responders dispatched to deliver it. Text, photos, and videos in combination with the robust determination technologies are poised to alter PSAP operations. Just think about whatever in your particular part of the U.S. that you call home, the last recent major emergency or multi-alarm fire, and think about the growth in situational awareness that the PSAPs already have just in the last couple of years. And then think about what Next Generation 911 is bringing in with videos and images and text and the ability to reach out and geo-target alerts. It increasingly appears that PSAPs aren't just the call taker and pass it to the dispatch, that PSAPs are really command and control centers. They're where the best awareness of what's going on exists. They're the ones that have that connection to the victims of a particular a casualty and have that running update into, I see smoke. I think we see flames now. We've got somebody who's not breathing well. That image of what PSAPs will be in the future, and some are closer to that than others, really, I think, needs to underpin our task here. It's not to look at the PSAPs of 5 years ago or the PSAPs today. It's to get ahead of this and anticipate what will PSAPs need to be for communities as these additional capabilities manifest themselves, and what new threats to that resiliency, that reliable communications function that the PSAPs provide will present themselves as we attain that greater value proposition for the PSAP centers. But the same technology advances that promise to alter dramatically the manner in which 911 call centers operate also present significant challenges. PSAPs must deal with complex questions of how to design and deploy new technologies that will be reliable and resilient 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. PSAPs must be prepared for times of crisis such as hurricanes, earthquakes, and wildfires, but as we move into the era of Next Generation 911 and IP-based architectures, they must also develop the capability to secure and defend those networks and systems from cyber threats. And PSAPs must marshal often limited funding and personnel resources to support these transitions and sustain operations in the long term, while expending these resources cost-effectively and efficiently. Who has all the money in their jurisdiction to do all the possible things they might do with Next Generation 911 and defend it well? No one in this room. I'm telling you, we've got a challenge ahead of ourselves. And in most cases, when I ask that question, there's not enough money just to look at the functionality, added functionality that they want to bring in, or to develop the kind of training programs that PSAP operators will need. And if there's not enough money for that, then we introduce this, oh my goodness, it's all Internet Protocol based now. What are you going to do to defend it? It's pretty clear that you can't go very far around the subject of architectures, whether they be physical, virtual, or operational, without asking the money question. And we've got to be very mindful that efficiency is key. And the greatest degree of efficiency, while we'll always get marginal efficiencies around improving shift schedules and improving the human-machine interface and looking at call queues and things like that, but I very much believe that the greatest opportunity to garner significant efficiency so that we can cover those new functionalities, the new threats we need to be responsive to, will come from designing smart from the beginning, baking in how we're going to address cyber, looking at those new functions that voice and video and data are going to bring to bear in thinking from the beginning about how to ensure that each of those has a resource consideration as we go forward. So optimizing PSAP operations and designs for this new environment demands foresight, deliberate planning, deep technical expertise, careful resource allocation, and creativity. And if one of those descriptors didn't fit you, you fall into the creativity bucket, okay? So we definitely want new, good, creative ideas here to help us work that. And, oh, by the way, if you just look at the people assembled for this task force, we really do have the deep technical expertise, the resource understanding, the operational experience around been there, done that, and been a part of a lot of emergencies component. And each of you has a creative piece that we expect you to help us with. At this table and on the bridge, we have representation from federal, state, tribal authorities, and local government agencies and organizations. They are joined by communication service providers and organizations representing wireline, wireless, interconnected voice over internet protocol or VoIP communication service providers and other IP-enabled providers. 911 system service providers are playing a critical role in defining the new platforms and architectures, and they are a part of this task force. Also present and absolutely critical to this effort are the organizations representing consumers and the disabilities community, as they will ensure the pursuit of optimal technologies and network features do not leave out the interests, the very important interests of those who depend on these networks in the most trying of circumstances. Today, therefore, this task force will commence work in 3 critical areas. First, it will study and make recommendations on the optimal approach to cybersecurity for PSAPs. We've got CCA and a number of smaller jurisdictions here today represented where the approach to cyber is just going to be a challenge. You know, the good news in IP is that even small PSAPs can do wonderful things with new functionalities. The bad news is that before, if you just looked at the threats to your PSAP and your communications, that threat had to be right there where the infrastructure was. Tain't so no more. That threat can be half a world away with a cyber threat. So I don't think we need to, be too alarmist about that. But it's something we've got to plan for. And I think if we approach that with dispatching this task force, that we're going to be able to come up with some good recommendations on how to make that more efficient and effective for smaller jurisdictions as well as the largest of jurisdictions. And Jay English from APCO is going to be the head of that working group. So thank you, Jay. Second, the group will report on and recommend a path for PSAPs to implement next-generation 911 architectures. And when I say architectures, it has an S because we really want to think, and I'm an engineer at my core. I started out a mechanical engineer, and I was a chief engineer on a amphibious ship and on a fast frigate. So I kind of approach problems from an engineering thought process. But Dana helped me understand that while architecture certainly will need to have a strong technical component to them, that just as important will be the operational architecture. And we need to think about the people that are staffing these next-generation 911 PSAPs and have we designed to ensure that they are going to be effectively employed, and is there the kind of training that needs to be there in those cases. And the final architecture, in my mind, is when I think physical, I think the wires, I think the modems and the CAD machines, but there's a virtual component too. And as we look to a future that increasingly knows that clouds don't just produce snow, that clouds also host information services, there's really increasingly a virtual aspect that we'll want to consider as we look at what's the best way to serve PSAPs in the future. And David Hall is going to be our working group chair for the architecture group. And if you look at those two things, you just come right back to it's going to cost money. And we need to make sure that we're efficient from the very beginning of this. And what might be an optimal design if you're looking to defend something may not be the right affordable match with that. So we absolutely have to look at rational options for the rational allocation of scarce resources, whether personnel or capital, to ensure long-term viable operational stance for the next generation PSAP. And Phil Jones has agreed to be the working chair for the money part. Shortly, we will hear in more detail from our working group chairs on each of these tasks. We know that one size will not fit all. There are lots of reasons that some communities have said, you know what, I want to pull my what used to be disparate smaller PSAPs into larger organizations to bring in new functionalities and to leverage what that larger team can bear. I equally know in my heart that there are PSAPs that I visited where because of the way they dispatch, because of the limitation on resources there and maybe the volunteer aspects of fire or EMS, that having a PSAP operator from the community, of the community, for the community is a really important thing. And I think as we look at separating or at least defining a path for operational, for physical, for virtual, that new opportunities present themselves, and that I just look at my own staff and see how effective we can be through teleworking. It's pretty amazing that architectures that maybe consider the smaller PSAPs, in fact, plugging into and benefiting from larger capabilities. I know Connecticut visit up there in the fall, and they've done some amazing things with the over 200 PSAPs they have, orienting around 6 anchor PSAPs. So I encourage the group really to look creatively around the different options and not just hunker down to what works in your jurisdiction as to being the right answer for the rest of the country, because I think we really do want to develop a range of best fit kind of models. In that, we know that one of the real cost drivers, but also one of the real underlying aspects of readiness is our relationship with the industry as PSAPs look to ensure that the communication services that they get are effective. So looking from that aspect of readiness as well will be important. Again, I want to thank you all for serving on this task force. We look forward to hearing of your progress along the way, and we look forward to seeing your recommendations on solving some of the most important communication challenges that our country faces today. And at this time, I turn you over to the capable hands of your chair, Steve Souter.
David, thank you so much for those remarks. I think I speak for everybody at this table when I voice my personal appreciation and our collective appreciation for the attention that the Commission has given to our field 911 in the last several years. It is interesting to note that in 21 days we will celebrate the 47th anniversary of the first 911 call made in the United States of America. From the 7.5 square mile community of Haleysville, Alabama. And here we are, almost 47 years later, and 911 is absolutely the most recognized number in the United States. And about 260 million times a year, our residents will call 911 as their first defense in time of emergency. I agree with you that in recent years, our profession and our industry has received attention that it has been long overdue. And again, I thank the Commission for its role in helping to make that happen. I like to say with pride that 911 is the gateway through which every emergency in America must pass. Before a blue and red light flashes, before a whistle on a volunteer fire station blows, before a pager rings, before an air horn blows, the front line of public safety in the United States, our call takers and our dispatchers, are on the job. They have not been given the attention that they have been deserving of for these many years either. So by nature of the breadth of experience that this body has, and I am most anxious to hear as we do a roll call and allow you to introduce yourselves and with your background, just how rich a diversity we have on this task force. I am also delighted that it is made up by an appropriate representation of PSAPs, as well as the obvious associations, and I'm a long-term strong believer in both APCO and NENA, and thank you, Jay, and thank you, Brian, for being on the task force as well. We've got a tremendous opportunity before us, given to us as a gift, if you will. And over the next 9 months, it is our duty and our responsibility to fulfill that obligation to the very best of our ability. There is no doubt in my mind that we have the experience that we can do that on your behalf. So we look forward 9 months out to providing a set of recommendations to the Commission that will help it. Certainly in the last 5 or 6 years, Next Generation 911 has dominated our vocabulary. And I think generally speaking, the population in general thinks of that as being simply new technology. And we certainly know that a large part of it is new technology. But it is also an opportunity, and I think supported by this task force creation, that will allow us to look at the next generation of 911 in a broader perspective. There are only about 4 or 5 true milestones in our profession and our industry over the last 47 years. Obviously, the creation of 911, selective routing, wireless phase 1 and 2, VoIP 911, and now next generation 911. And again, generally speaking, they have all been technology-driven innovations and benchmark days. But there is much, much more behind the scenes to 911 than just the technology. And David, you outlined it very well, and certainly it is, I think, very well represented by the 3 working groups that you've identified as well. On a personal note, when I heard that there was going to be a task force formed, I, was interested, and I watched it closely. I had no idea that as it would unfold that I would have the personal privilege and pleasure and honor to work with you and to be on the task force. My 911 career goes back to 1977. I was a firefighter in the District of Columbia Fire Department. It was a secondary PSAP to the Metropolitan Police Department 911 Center. And when 911 went live, we had a poll at work as to who would be the first person to answer the first 911 call reporting a fire in Washington, D.C. I was, by simply chance, that person. And coincidentally, it was for the odorous smoke at the U.S. Department of Agriculture headquarters, which is 2 blocks to my right. So it's just interesting how life unfolds, the opportunities that you're given, the fact that you have an opportunity to grow with the profession and with the industry. So I'm humbled And I really, really do look forward to working closely with all of you to help us collectively meet the expectations and the challenges that have been laid out by the Commission. They have provided to me a roll call, and if you don't mind, it is divided to those that we knew would be present physically, and then followed by those that we knew would be on a teleconference. I don't know whether that may have changed because of the weather. And for those of you that are from our area, you know what 3 snowflakes will do to the psyche of Washington, D.C. It appears right now that we are going to escape any kind of significant snow, but certainly, as David mentioned, we are sensitive very much to the flight plans of everybody at the table. So as he pointed out, and I would reiterate, we're going to try and speed this along in deference to those that want to get back to the airport in hopes that you will be able to get back home before anything really closes down. I'm going to sit down, and then I am going to really go off script a little bit, if you don't mind. I'm going to begin over here with Mary Boyd on my left. And then we'll go around the table rather than try and go down this roll call list, if you will. And I would personally appreciate it if in the course of your remarks, as you describe who you are and what your roles have been or will be, if you would try to recapture, as I was proud to recapture, how many years you have in our business. Because I would like to, at some early point in our effort, be able to say that this august body represents X number of years of 911 experience. So Mary Boyd, welcome to the table, and please share with us a little bit about Ms. Boyd, the queen of 911.
If I could just add one item to your menu of things that the people need to add. If there's an element within the chartering or our description of the working groups that you think we've missed, that the next big thing that we need to be worried about, or a current thing that we need to be worrying about that's not included, if any of you could just include that item as well. This is the one chance we're going to have to really go around and touch everyone. So if we've missed one of those elements, please bring that up. Okay. Mary.
I'm Mary Boyd with Intrado. Thank you, Steve. Like Steve, I've been in the business a long time, 33 years in the 911 business, starting with local government, managing PSAPs to running the Texas 911 Commission for about 10 years, and then onto the private sector. I jumped the fence. So I, too, am very proud to be at this table to be able to look at what we can do to optimize networks, look at funding issues. It's quite an opportunity to be with this group, and I thank you for the opportunity.
Hey, good afternoon. My name is Brad Blanken. I work for the Competitive Carriers Association. I think you could put me down for maybe 18. I was a young man, maybe more. I was part of the nation's 911 service as a United States Marine, so that might count. I don't know if that counts or not, Admiral, but thank you. But as a 911 service, wireless, when we started working in 911 in the late 90s. So the CCA represents the competitive carriers in the U.S. So we're very focused on how we can help provide the service for wireless operators and supporting the PSAP. So I'm really appreciative of the opportunity to join the group and looking forward to working with you. So thanks for having me.
Mario Durango, Motorola Solutions. 32 years, all with Motorola, always working on government business. I lead the systems architecture team at Motorola, so I'm the chief architect for our next generation solutions. My scope's much broader than just 911. Been actually more focused probably on the wireless broadband transition that's happening and the global aspects of it as well, but I do get involved, obviously, on the 911 side as well. I was on the NRIC committee back in 2005, 10 years ago, that was looked at how to improve communications beyond E911 at that time. And so that was really right when NENA was getting formed and looking at those architectures. So I'm glad I'm going to be focused more on the 911 side of things in this effort here. I'm very proud of that. If there was one aspect that I thought should be added maybe to the agenda, And that's what are the different sources of information and content that are going to be necessary to support 911 type calls. Social media is a big aspect now. I don't think, even when Nina started, I don't think social media was as big a thing as it is now, but it's going to play a big role in how we do 911 calls and how we respond to emergency communications. So I'd like to make sure that gets, and I think we can bring that into the architecture effort, but I just want to make sure we cover that. Thank you again.
Thank you. My name is Tony Montani with Verizon, and my thanks to be selected to participate. I'm excited to be here, and Verizon is happy to participate in the committee. My experience with Verizon goes back 28 years, and I've been in and out of 911. Most recently, though, I have the 911 wireline domestic footprint, so engineering, operations, emergency response if there's a trouble on our network. That's my team and my responsibility. In the past, I've had other roles doing tandem engineering, trunk routing, a lot of different network aspects outside plant engineering, so I have a broad experience on Verizon wireline network, and I hope that will be of value to the team. So, thank you.
Good afternoon, Sean Petty. I'm with Mission Critical Partners. I'm representing the Industry Council on Emergency Response Technologies, or ICERT. I didn't think I'd hear myself say this, but I'm going on over 20 years at this point, and I like to say that I've been on both sides of the microphone. I spent 10 years as an EMS supervisor. I've been a PSAP manager. I've been a dispatcher, and like Mary said, then I switched over to the other side. So I'm now representing commercial interests at this point. So pretty broad background. I am also truly an engineer at heart, so I'll try to dissect and fix everything, but I'm also honored to be here, and I think I can offer a lot in various aspects, not only on the operational side, but also on the technical side. So thank you again.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dana Wahlberg, and I come with 26 years of industry experience. My first endeavor in 911 was as a 911 call taker in St. Louis County, which is the largest county nearly, I think, in the entire United States. We have 7,000 square miles there, and dispatched for 185 different public safety agencies, and everything from little villages of 2 or 3 people to a city of the first class. So I had the opportunity to get quite a broad base of experience in that role, and I eventually worked my way up through a supervisory position, and then was the manager of the PSAP when I left for the opportunity to be the 911 program manager for the state of Minnesota. And there I support the infrastructure and networking for our 104 PSAPs, and I was extremely humbled and honored when I received the call from the Admiral and David Firth at the end of last week, inviting me to serve as Steve's deputy chair for this group. And I'm just amazed at the collective amount of diverse intelligence in this room, and I think we have every opportunity to make big decisions and really set a new course for the 911 industry in the next 9 months. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Robert Brown. I've been I'm the IT manager for the state of New Hampshire. I'm representing NIPSTIC. Altogether, I was adding up while everyone was talking, I've got 25 years experience in public safety, 19 as the IT manager for New Hampshire 911, and 5 as a military policeman. I figured we'd count that. So I look forward to working with y'all. Thank you.
Cool.
Good afternoon. My name is Lori Flaherty, and I'm the coordinator of the National 911 program, which has just celebrated its 10th anniversary, so I bring that with me. Previous to that, as many of you know, I was an emergency nurse for 28 years, so I bring that experience with me, and I thank you for the opportunity to be a part of this group. I'm really excited to be here. As many of you know, we really work closely with the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau. We laugh a lot about the fact that we have each other on speed dial, so I really look forward to the recommendations that this group will make, not only, for the purposes of what the FCC will do directly, but for what we will be doing together. So thank you very much.
Lori, before you go, how many years?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Good afternoon. My name is Joe Heaps. I am honored and very much appreciate the opportunity to participate. I will build on Brad and Robert's comments. I was commissioned as a naval officer in 1986, and I've served several roles. I was at the FCC and the International Bureau in the late 90s, served on a couple U.S. delegations to the ITU. And then most recently at the Commission, I was brought back as a detailee to work on the National Broadband Plan and worked the Broadband Technology Opportunities Program as a detailee to the U.S. Department of Commerce. In my current role, I'm at the U.S. Department of Justice at the National Institute of Justice, which is the research and development arm of the department, and work very closely with the Commission on things like contraband cell phones and the technologies that our first responders are going to use in the future. And I'm very happy to be a part of the group and very much look forward to the conversation.
A lot of times I don't need a mic, so we'll see how it goes today. I'm Jay English with APCO International. Appreciate the opportunity to be here, and what a talented and diverse group of folks. It's a privilege to be part of this team. 26 years in public safety, 32 in public service, including a few years as a Marine reservist. So Semper Fi, Brad. And Admiral, all due respect, just because our check said Department of the Navy did not make us sailors. And a few years with the Air Force in electronic warfare, and I've been privileged to run 3 consolidated PSAPs in my career, as well as serve as a police officer, firefighter, and EMT during my 26 years. And I am an engineer at heart, but I tell people, especially folks at APCO, I'm a recovering engineer. So it's a 12-step program, as Lori said, and I'm on step 2. But thank you to the Admiral and to the Commission for the opportunity, and I look forward to working with everybody.
Hi, everyone. My name is Alicia Burns, and I took my first 911 call April 5th of 1980. I was in preschool at the time. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. 26 years as a 911 dispatcher of all aspects, fire, EMS, medical. Then I became an APCO trainer for years, public educator for many, many years, still am, and absolutely still as enthusiastic as I was April 5th, 1980. 26 years in dispatching. My agency got consolidated, so I made the leap to the private sector, working for Verizon Business 911 effort on the West Coast for about 6 years, where I did service management, doing root cause analysis and outages for 6 years. Then I moved on, and now I'm with Frontier Communications in our 911. And I, too, am humbled and just enjoy this opportunity. I think of back when we were just dispatchers and we had no say and no attention. So I'm still loving this. I walked in the door saying it only took me 34 years to get here, but so happy and very honored. So thank you.
Hi, I'm Gina Green. I'm with Sprint. I've been with Sprint for 17 years, all of it in the 911 area. Initially started out taking in requests in operations for Phase 1. Then Phase 2, worked my up to a supervisor and to a manager. I've spent the last 10 years doing regulatory and voice services development. So that brings us into the NG 911 arena. I've also worked with a lot of these people on various different committees and groups, part of CISRIC and ADIS, ESIF, ELOC now going forward. So I, too, am very honored to be a part of this group and work with such knowledgeable people within the industry, and I thank you for including me.
Good afternoon. I'm April Heinze. I also usually don't need the mic. I can project very well. I am a PSAP director in Michigan for Eaton County, and I am honored to be representing the Michigan Communications Directors Association, which basically takes care of all of the PSAPs within Michigan. I have 23 years experience in the same PSAP. I started off as a dispatcher and worked my way up to the director's position, and I am very grateful to be here. I have a lot of am also on a lot of different committees and do a lot of different things, and sometimes I just wonder how I got here. So I'm honored to be here. 23 years in a PSAP, 25 years in public safety.
Good afternoon. I'm Dusty Rhodes. I work for the Department of Homeland Security in the Office of Emergency Communications. I joined DHS in 2008 after 33 years in the fire service. My first 911 call was in 1978, so Steve has me beat by a year. However, Steve and I have gone back quite a ways. Our paths have had the pleasure of crossing many times. The one opportunity I think which we may want to consider adding, it's not explicit, it's perhaps implicit in the working groups, is governance. We talk a lot about the operation funding, but exactly how is that going to be accomplished through governance structures? Thank you.
Yeah, Dusty, thanks for bringing that up. It's my sense, unless there's any pushback, that let's do governance, but let's do that within the resource working group. I think those two things really go hand in hand, and rather than necessarily encumber the architecture group with that, I think it more appropriately fits within Phil's group, if that's okay with you, Phil. Sure. Yeah, great. Thank you.
My name is Merdad Negeban. I'm CTO of a company called BeamSmart, and I don't want to bring the average down because everybody like around 20 years of experience in 911. So our experience in public safety is around 3 years. My background is 25 years of experience with broadband communication, wireline, wireless, starting from 10 base T, if you guys recall, all the way to 802.11a and LTE. So now we are working on a cloud communication platform. And, as a matter of fact, we kind of applied in a small community to build the next generation 911, and I'm hoping that we bring a lot of fresh ideas and the experience we gained in the past 3 years building that small community to this committee. And one of the key things I think is, Internet of Things. I mean, one of the missing things, connected sensors. I think a lot of 911 calls going to be initiated by, connected sensors. So I hope within one of these 3 committees we can answer that. And I really feel that could also be a source of revenue for funding the PSAP transition from legacy products to next generation.
My name is Brian Fonts. I'm with the National Emergency Number Association. I'm looking around the room here. I see Mary Boyd and Brad and some of these people I've worked with directly or indirectly over the years. I guess I've been involved with 911 in a variety of vantage points, from the first petitions that were filed in 1992 leading to 94-102. I was here at the FCC on the 8th floor with the commissioner. Then working with Mary and now current chairman Tom Wheeler, when Tom Wheeler was representing the wireless industry to negotiate 911 in an E911 context, looking at 911 from a wireless perspective. And then in the commercial world, when I actually worked for a carrier and having to deal with 911 implementations, particularly E911. And then now with the National Emergency Number Association. So collectively in all of those experiences, it's about 23 years. And then the only other things that I bring to the table is that, through weird experiences, frankly, to negotiations between de Klerk and Mandela governments in Pretoria during the change of government, to heading a U.S. delegation, negotiating a treaty at the ITU, to working with warring factions in Bosnia for 7 years to do some institution building post-Dayton. Gives me a lot of, I think, negotiation skills, if nothing else, survivability. A few of the things that I think that were mentioned here that I strongly agree with is the social media inclusion. I think that's right on point. Governance, Dusty, is obviously tied in, I think, a lot to where we go with 911 and next generation 911. And then the connected sensors, that's been a subject of a lot of discussion over the last 9 or 10 months, and so hopefully there'll be some resolution on that in a not too distant future to look at that as a possibility. I look forward to working with this group, and I want to thank you for this opportunity.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jeff Whittick. I'm with Airbus DS Communications currently. I have approximately 35 years in public safety, worked with many of you in the past. 18 years with Montgomery County, Pennsylvania Department of Emergency Dispatch Services. Sean and I are both colleagues there. I retired from there and then went to plant equipment, and of course plant equipment has evolved over the years, and I'm in now my 17th year. During the time I was with Montgomery County, I implemented the first 911 system in Montgomery County back in 1991. I then formed the first NENA chapter in Pennsylvania. I was the founding president. And since I've been with plant equipment, or now Airbus, I've held various number of jobs, many jobs, because I started as an engineer and I worked my way through the business aspect of the job as well. I'm very honored to be here with you and look forward to working with you all.
Good afternoon. My name is Philip Jones. I'm a commissioner with the Washington Utilities Transportation Commission. It's good to see a lot of familiar faces in the room for those of you who attend NARUC meetings from time to time. Steve, I'm going to bring the average down too, so just 10 years for me. I've never worked in a PSAP, never been a call dispatcher, never call taker. But one thing I learned when I became a commissioner 10 years ago was the importance of public safety to the states in which carriers provide communication services. Although state PUCs do not directly regulate, obviously PSAPs, this is a local government responsibility. In many of the states, states are getting more actively involved, I think, as the networks grow and as we move and introduce more IP into the system. My state over the last year has become fairly infamous for 911. We had a terrible outage, April 9 and 10, in which service was down for 8 hours. We are in the process of investigating that now. We also had a terrible landslide. For those of you who remember, we had a landslide up by Oso, which is just due east of Everett, Washington. And then to top it all off, in the summer we had forest fires in Okanagan, right up by the Canadian border. So it hasn't been a great year for 911 in our state, but these issues of resiliency and redundancy are issues that are really important. I think the other thing I would say, I'm not going to add it to the agenda, is that we regulate at commissions electricity, natural gas, and water. These are all basic infrastructure networks. And whether it's smart grid, communications, the devices that communicate wirelessly from home to the electric company, or it's getting into natural gas and water as well. Cybersecurity. When I was president of NARUC-J, you may know, I made that my theme for the year. Each NARUC president has a theme, and mine was cyber and physical security, not just of electricity and natural gas, but also communication networks. And then I think somebody talked about the Internet of Things, I think Brian and a few others. So the point I'm making is that the communications networks are becoming increasingly interwoven into the other infrastructure networks that are both regulated and unregulated. So Dave has tasked me with the unenviable task of figuring out resources, money, states that divert 911 funding. I think many of you know who they are. State legislators or governors that may use 911 funds for purposes other than they're intended for. Some states have direct statutory authority over 911, some don't, some have hybrid funding, state, local, some just have local. And believe me, I'm learning this as well, so I hope to learn from all of you, because there's a tremendous diversity of both statutes and practices out there that I think we need to look at and talk about providing some best practices and some models for other states, because this is kind of a partnership activity in each of the states where we try to work with the counties, the PSAPs, the military departments, the Homeland Security Department. So in that spirit of partnership, I pass it back to you, Steve.
Thank you, Phil. There are 12 of our members that were not able to make it here today. They have joined us by teleconference, and I think for your ease and ours, I will go down the roll call on that, just so that no one gets overlooked or no one steps on anyone. The first on the list is Bernard Abibo. Bernard?
Bernard Abibo here. I'm a principal architect in the Skype division at Microsoft. I have about 20 years experience. Started out as a mechanical, electrical, and petroleum engineer investigating accidents. And I've been working on communications technology, both in the IP arena and more recently in NextGen 911, former chair of the Internet Architecture Board.
Thank you, Bernard.
And also a former member of the EAC.
Thank you, Bernard. Next is Tom Breen.
Hello, I'm sorry I had to get off mute. Yes, my name's Tom Breen. I'm representing AT&T. I've got about 37 years in the telecommunications industry with AT&T and all its predecessor companies, as far back as the former Bell System companies. My experience has mostly been in network. I have had some corporate communications experience, but I have an in-depth technical background, and I've been involved in 911 within, AT&T and its predecessors for about 25 years now. 15 years ago, I earned my first ENP certification from NENA, and I am currently involved in bringing AT&T's ESINet vision to reality, in the USA, based on the NENA 08003 vision. The last time I had the pleasure of serving the FCC in an official capacity was on NREC 7, where I worked with Mary Boyd and some other folks, and I'm happy to be back.
Thank you, Tom. Next is Lieutenant Tracy Felty.
Hi, I'm Lieutenant Tracy Felty from Saline County Sheriff's Office. I also wear the hat as a 911 director. I have about 20 years in public safety. Some of that, 20 of those years have been with the local fire department, 16 years here at the Sheriff's Office, as well as overseeing a dispatch center that receives calls from 10 counties and 3 states. 12 days ago, we turned on our next generation system. 11 days ago, the Text to 911 was also turned on, and we are part of the Counties of Southern Illinois program, which is the NENA National Pilot Project for North America on NG. One of the concerns I have is the rules and regulations and policies that are set in place by some of the states that kind of hinder NG 911, and we may need to look into what happens in other states.
Thank you, Tracy. Next from the northeast part of the United States, Mark Fletcher and his trusty snowblower. Mark, hello.
Thank you, Steve. Hopefully one of these years you and I will be able to get into the same room together. Thanks very much. Been trying for 4 years now. So first of all, I'm very honored to have been selected for this committee. Many of the names are familiar out there, and I know I've been known to have an opinion or two over the years and a big mouth to get the message out, so I'm glad to be able to put that to good use. I started as a dispatcher and an EMT back in the early 80s in a small town in New Jersey before 911 even existed. I answered calls for 3 towns there on a 20-button 182 key system telephone. And I've taken a while, but I've served on the Emergency Access Advisory Committee at the FCC and also at the NSTAC Technical Subcommittee. I'm really looking forward to the additional information that commercial PBXs and commercial networks will bring to the table. Many people have said it, but I believe it's the culmination of all this additional information, all of this situational awareness, all of this information that's going to give our public safety dispatchers and telecommunicators the tools that they need to make intelligent decisions with real-time data. I'm also looking to take care of even the basics, and I'm just going to take a second to bring to light. None of this will work if you can't reach 911, and I'm glad to see that just last week in Marshall, Texas, Hank Hunt was honored after a year worth of work where Commissioner Pai has now reported that 911 access from hotel motels is going to be at the 100% mark at the later part of this year. So we are making progress. So now that we've got access solved, let's get the information together and actually do something with it. Again, thanks very much, and hopefully I'll be down there for the next meeting.
Thank you, Mark. Next is Jim Gorky from the state of Texas, where 911 is more of a religion than it is a public utility.
You know it, Steve. Hi, everyone. My name's Jim Gerke. I'm the CEO of the Texas 911 Alliance. The 911 Alliance is an association of some 26 independent emergency communication districts. Our members serve approximately 60% of our state's population. I've been involved in 911 stuff, I guess, going back to the middle 1980s, thanks to Mary Boyd, and in public safety matters well before that. I followed Mary as director of the Texas State 911 Commission after she left. Past president of NASNA, have worked closely with Nina in a variety of activities over the years. I'm currently co-chair of Nina's Next Generation 911 Transition Planning Committee. I've worked closely with a lot of folks that are on this task force, and I'm looking forward to continuing to do that here. My alliance has never been shy about engaging the Commission in many of its proceedings and initiatives, and we certainly look forward to doing that with this task force. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you, Jim. Next is Larry Hatch.
Good morning. I've been involved in public safety for 40 years, starting off as a police officer and assistant fire chief in a small community in our state. Then I worked at a larger department, and then about 27 years ago came to work for my current 911 center as the assistant director. I'm representing the Oregon chapter of APCO NINA, and very much look forward to the involvement and what will come of our work.
Thank you, Larry. Tim has told me that, unfortunately, David Hull, who is next on our list via teleconference, was called away because of either the current or pending weather conditions to the activation of his community's EOC. So David will not be on the call with us. So we'll move forward to Michael Kennedy.
Yes, this is Michael Kennedy. I'm with the Program Manager Information Sharing Environment. I've been basically with the federal government for 40 years this year, and of that, it's been 25 years directly associated with information technology, communications, and multimedia in various capacities throughout the federal government as a civilian. I have not dealt directly with the 9/11, but I've dealt with this technology and the policies and framework of which it's built around, and really look forward to assisting and working with the task force.
Thank you, Michael. I'm going to turn it over to Tim for just a quick section.
Yes. So I'm speaking on behalf of Rebecca Ledoux. She is with Speech Communications Assistance by Telephone Incorporated. She is a member of the National Telecommunications Relay Service Advisory Council and a Consumer Advisory Council with the FCC. She's also on the Governor's Advisory Board for Telecommunications Relay for the state of Maryland.
And next is Chris Littlewood, and Chris also will be participating by an interpreter service. Chris?
Good afternoon, everybody. This is Chris Littlewood with St. Petersburg College Center for Public Safety Innovation. I guess you could chart me down for 20-plus years of experience in public safety arena. Way back when, 20 plus years ago, I worked for a teeny tiny department as a police and 911 dispatcher. More recently, in the last 7 plus years, I've worked as an inclusive emergency and public safety planner and trainer because I am a late deaf and very hard of hearing adult. And I work for effective communications for people with disabilities and people with access and functional needs. I serve on the FEMA National Advisory Council as a disability advisor and was also on the previously formed Emergency Access Advisory Council with the FCC. Aside from the area of public safety for everybody, I also want to make sure that public safety is accessible for people with disability and access and functional needs. And as many others have said, it's been an absolute privilege to be involved with FCC, and I look forward to working with everybody. Very sorry I couldn't be there today. Travel to D.C. As the weekend progressed felt very much like whether I wanted it to be or not, that it would turn out to be a one-way ticket. I probably would have made it in, but not made it out. So I'll stay where I have no need for Mark's snowblower in the 60-plus weather of Florida. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Next is Richard Gray from California.
Yes, hello. Good morning, everyone. My name is Richard Ray, and I represent the City of Louisiana Department of Disability Services as the Technology Access Coordinator, and I also work as the National Association for the Deaf representative. And I'm a very proud member of the National Emergency Number Association as a co-chair of the Access Commission. And also I used to be a former member of the FEC Emergency Access Advisory Commission, and I'm very honored to be a part of this wonderful group. And I really look forward to working with this new commission. And I've been involved with 911 services and industry for the last, since 1992. And that was a few years ago, if you could count it. And that was when we had absolutely no access to emergency services for deaf people or hard of hearing people who have a speech disability. So I saw the change over the years, and for us to finally catch up with the newest technology and making it more accessible for all people with disabilities. I really look forward to being involved with this wonderful task force, and thank you so much for the opportunity. I'm honored to be with everyone on the team.
Thank you, Richard. And last is Brian Tagaban.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Very honored to be here. I'm Brian Tagaban of the Navajo Nation. We are the largest land-based tribe located in the southwestern portion of the United States in the Four Corners area. We span 3 states and 11 counties. Currently on our Navajo reservation, which is 27,000 square miles, we have 8 operational PSAPs, all operating on administrative lines. So we have no fully operational PSAPs on the reservations, and we have to deal with 3 different states and numerous municipalities and counties, agencies. I am the executive director for the Navajo Nation Telecommunications Regulatory Commission. We were recently delegated responsibility by our Navajo Nation Council to implement a 911 solution. Public safety is for tribe. For those of you who don't know, is usually delegated to the federal as a federal responsibility through the Bureau of Indian Affairs under the Department of Interior. We have chosen to contract that from the federal government, but we still do not have any operational PSAPs. So I would be interested in the governance and funding, and also implementing an optimal solution for our tribal situation. So I'm going to bring the average way down. I've been working on this issue for a better part of 3 years. I've been a director of the NNTRC for 5 years, and so we've seen this as a problem and decided to take this on. I'm also a member of the Intergovernmental Advisory Committee and the FCC Tribal Task Force. My background is primarily within IT and in networking, but the last 5 years I've also been working in telecom. And I look forward to speaking with you all and learning from this group. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brian. Welcome to our group. We're glad to have you. And I'm going to turn it back now for a moment to Admiral Simpson, who will introduce one of the commissioners.
It's my pleasure to welcome today really the man whose vision this task force was, Commissioner Mike O'Rielly, who, as we were looking at some of the underlying aspects of failures in the 911 system, as we were looking at the impact of new technology, he really had the vision to say, wow, we shouldn't just keep doing the same thing we were in years past, just because that's how we originally set it up, that what got us here won't necessarily get us there. Commissioner O'Rielly has great experience where it all begins. 911 started from a statute, and each of us in our own jurisdictions derives our authorities from statutes either at the federal, state, or local level. So without further ado, let's give a warm welcome to Commissioner Mike O'Rielly.
Well, thank you for that very warm introduction. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk with you for a few moments. I was watching upstairs and taking my own roll call to see who was able to make it, and I tried to time my appearance just right. For those keeping score, I probably have about 21 to 22 years experience in the 911 issue area. Not all continuous. I had other responsibilities in many days, but I worked on just every component that you all have. I've never been a PSAP call taker or dispatcher, but I've spent many time with those that have. And so I have a couple, some short prepared remarks, and then I look forward to following your discussions over the many time periods. At the outset, I should thank you for your willingness to serve. I realize and recognize that everyone appointed to the task force already has many responsibilities outside of the commission, and this may take you some time away from your families, and I really apologize if it does. However, if the task force functions properly and concludes in a timely manner, your input and advice will be extremely helpful as the Commission continues to examine the future of emergency communications in America. As Admiral Simpson highlighted, I have a special interest in this task force because I had a major hand in its creation, albeit scope now is a bit more larger and varied than I first envisioned. And I know when watching the discussions earlier, some people have good ideas on ways to expand the agenda. But let me explain two purposes on which I trust you will focus your particular attention and what I hope to see at the end of your hard work, although you should include the recommendations you deem appropriate. First, the task force must spend considerable time examining what will be the optimal configuration of public service answering point systems and network configuration in terms of operations and cost efficiencies and emergency response. As many of you know, there are over 5,900 functioning PSAPs in the U.S. today. The large number and diffuse functionality, depending on the community being served, highlights certain problems and potential vulnerabilities that could be less prevalent in a more cohesive integrated configuration. I'm also very interested in determining ways to improve the current structure. I've discussed this issue for years with experts in the field and more recently with experts at both the Commission and outside. If we were to build a PSAP system today from scratch, knowing what we know about network architecture and emergency communications, there would likely be considerably fewer PSAPs. By some estimate, the current structure would be able to operate at optimal efficiency with as few as 3 nationwide. Others argue there should be no more than 1 per state. Part of your task is to help determine the number of PSAPs that are necessary to operate an efficient network and do so to the best of your ability, absent political considerations. In other words, this function is to create a baseline upon which to measure PSAP modernization as we convert to NG 911. This is not to suggest in any way there are not highly functioning PSAPs operating today. Just 2 weeks ago, I visited the Fairfax County Department of Public Safety. My good friend Steve hosted us and was able to see firsthand their modern facilities and approach to call taking, dispatch, and emergency response. The vast majority of PSAPs are highly functional, providing valuable public services to their communities. But one of the most important functions of this task force is to find ways to improve the great PSAP network we already have, and for this to happen with all options on the table. Second, I want this task force to examine whether states that divert 911 fees away from PSAPs to other functions should be ineligible to fill various roles at the Commission. Our focus on ensuring 911 fees are not diverted is not just an internal commitment and sound public policy, but one that Congress has established as a priority. Many of you know the Spectrum Act's NG 911 grant program excludes eligibility for those localities that divert 911 funding. Last month, the Commission released its 6th report to Congress regarding state 911 fee diversions. The good news is the state of Kansas is no longer diverting fees. The bad news is that the number of states conducting such diversions has increased from 4 to 6. Specifically, California, Illinois, New Jersey, New York, Rhode Island, and Washington, and the territory of Puerto Rico reported diverting or transferring 911 E911 fee collections for purposes other than 911 E911. This is unacceptable. Under the current system, converting to a fully functional NG 911 system will require significant resources and commitments from states. While the Commission may not have an ability to fully protect PSAPs from such diversions, we must explore all opportunities to discourage such behavior. 911 E911 fees are collected from consumers in a jurisdiction for specific purposes relating to preserving and maintaining their respective 911 E911 systems. They are not a budget slush fund to be used for purposes labeled as related to public safety. And so I wish you best ahead in your conversations and discussions. I look forward to reviewing your work, and I trust it will be very fruitful to us at the Commission. So thank you so much for your commitment to this task force, and I look forward to your future work. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner O'Reilly. On a personal note, the Commissioner mentions that he visited us a couple of weeks ago. He is the 4th Commissioner to visit us. That doesn't make us special. It makes us very routine. We just happen to be close. But he was here with his entire staff, and we put them under the headset to show them what it is really like to be on the front line of public safety. As we have others that have preceded him, and we stress to him that although we might be close and are large, that the work that is done in Fairfax County is no different than the work that is done in a 2-person PSAP in rural Minnesota or anywhere else in the United States. But I am gratified, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, that this new level of attention that is given to both our profession and our industry by the Commission is very much appreciated, and I think, again, is reflective of the formation of this task force. I'm going to turn the mic back to Tim, who is going to go through some, as they say, housekeeping chores, or I would prefer to say logistical issues. So, Tim?
Well, actually, at this point, what I'd like to do is run through, and Deandra, if you could tee up the slides. I'd like to run through the working groups the initial working groups that have been defined for the near term. And if I just may emphasize to everyone that we do have participants on the bridge, and so when we speak and interact, it's very important to speak close to the mic because there's some difficulty on the CART captioning side if we're not doing that. So again, good afternoon. During this segment, I want to briefly review the origin of TFOPA, as we call it, and I'd like to lay out the initial structure and purpose of the task force and working groups, and then we'll have the opportunity to hear from Jay English and Commissioner Jones. Slide 2. There we go. So TFOPA, August 2014, second report in order in the text to 911 proceeding. The Commission found that further examination was needed in cooperation with state, local, and tribal nations and their associated PSAPs on the current structure and architecture of our nation's PSAPs. The large number of PSAPs, approaching 6,800, potentially increases the costs and resources needed from the communications industry, public safety community, and state, local, and tribal authorities. The Commission indicated that it was interested in determining whether additional consolidation of PSAP facilities and architecture would promote greater efficiency of operations, safety of life, and cost containment, while retaining needed integration with local first responder dispatch and support. The issue is especially timely as public safety communications centers are converting to NG911 in the coming years. The Commission directed the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau to study and report findings and recommendations in 4 areas. We're doing that through the mechanism of the task force. The first area is we have looking at optimal PSAP system and network configuration in terms of emergency communications efficiency, performance, and operations functionality. Number 2, the Commission asked us to look at cost projections for conversion to and annual operation of PSAPs that incorporate such optimal system design. Third, comparative cost projections for annual maintenance of all existing PSAPs annually and upgrading them to NG911. And fourth, recommendations on ways to prevent states from diverting E911 funding to other purposes. I'm not going to go through this particular slide, but generally, when a task force is formed, there's a process that has to unfold under the Federal Advisory Committee Act. The key point on this slide is to show you that you are a legally chartered Federal Advisory Committee. You are chartered through December of 2016. And then importantly, your first task is to begin reporting back to the Commission on voted items by April 30th. On slide 4, again, just shows the simple organizational structure for the task force. We have a chair, vice chair structure, and we have 3 working groups at this stage, which I'll run through very briefly. Slide 5, this working group 1 is looking at optimal cybersecurity for PSAPs, chaired by Jay English, Director of the Communications Center and 911 Services for APCO. As PSAP networks transition from TDM-based to IP-based architecture as part of the migration to NG911, they will face increasing exposure to cyber threats and vulnerabilities that did not exist in the legacy 911 environment. And with a new foundation to review cybersecurity readiness based on the National Institute for Standards and Technology Cybersecurity Framework, or NCF, and the ongoing work of the CISRIC, cyber risk management strategies are being developed for the communications sector that will benefit the NG911 ecosystem as a whole. However, NG911 cyber risk management strategies must also be implemented at the PSAP level, taking into consideration available PSAP resources and available expertise. Therefore, Working Group 1 will address these issues by developing recommendations for PSAP-specific cybersecurity practices based on the NIST cyber framework and other foundational resources. The Working Group will also identify resources and tools for PSAPs to use when developing cybersecurity strategies, and will make recommendations for PSAP cybersecurity workforce development and training. The tentative request to the task force is to vote on a final report deliverable in the September timeframe. Slide 6, Working Group 2 is going to be chaired by David Hall. He's the Deputy Director for Operations for the Pennsylvania Emergency Management Agency. As you've heard, he is currently dealing with snow. NG911 has the potential to improve PSAP effectiveness by offering more flexible and reliable call routing than legacy 911, improving PSAP situational awareness and response, and linking PSAPs to state or regional EZNets that support improved interconnection and consolidation of operations. However, the large number and diverse legacy architecture of PSAPs in the U.S. threatens to increase the cost and duration of the transition to NG911. To address these challenges, Working Group 2 will develop recommendations on how PSAPs can improve 911 functionality and cost effectiveness through consolidated NG911 network architecture, design, and operation. The working group will develop recommendations as appropriate for optimal NG911 system and network configurations for a range of existing PSAP use cases, for example, large urban or rural, provide projected costs and transition periods associated with optimized configurations, and ensuring and improving access to NG911 for people with disabilities. The working group will also update previous best practices for legacy PSAPs identified by CISRIC to address the specific requirements that PSAPs will face in the NG911 environment. Working Group 2 will have a tentative duration of 9 months with a vote requested on a final report also in the September timeframe. Slide 7, regarding the optimal approach, Working Group 3, the optimal approach to NG911 resource allocation for PSAPs will be chaired by Commissioner Philip Jones of the Washington State Utilities and Transportation Commission. PSAPs and associated communications dispatch centers have historically been built and operated at the municipal or county level and have been funded largely from 911 fees collected by state governments from wireline and wireless consumers. Generally, this structure creates challenges for jurisdictions seeking to migrate legacy PSAPs to next-generation 911 architecture and may call for new strategies for planning across multiple jurisdictions, allocating scarce financial resources and optimizing budgets for effective return on investment in new systems and technologies. These challenges are exacerbated in instances where 911 funding resources are diverted to non-911 uses, as has been documented in the Commission's annual 911 fee reports. As Commissioner O'Reilly mentioned, the Commission just released its 6th annual report last Friday, and we are going to see comment on that collection and ways to improve it. Working Group 3 then will examine ways for state, local, and tribal governments to address these issues. It's going to examine and develop recommendations on optimal resource allocation and budgeting for PSAPs to transition to NG911, and identifying potential models for sustainable funding of PSAP NG911 operations. The working group will also examine strategies for, 1, optimizing use of state 911 fees to expedite the transition to NG911 and creating incentives to discourage fee diversion. Working Group 3 will provide its first report to us in the July timeframe. So we'll now hear from Jay English, Chair of Working Group 1, regarding optimal cybersecurity for PSAPs.
Thank you, Mr. May. I may or may not have slides. If I do, that's good news, because you don't have to look at me. You can look at the slides. So, as Tim said, the Cybersecurity Working Group has some interesting challenges. And again, I'd like to thank Commissioner Wheeler and the Commission and Admiral Simpson and the Bureau for the opportunity to take a look at these. When I was in the Air Force, my job was to intercept, intrude, and otherwise interfere with enemy communications. As a PSAP director, my job was to make sure that wasn't done to my PSAP and my responders. I was, quite frankly, more successful with the Air Force's toys than I was with my PSAPs. And one of the things that concerns, I think, all of us in the operational world is that as our opportunities become brighter, I should say, for the PSAPs, the challenges that we face become more daunting. Several of the things that we have already started to discover is that with the emerging technologies, we have emerging threats and a number of different actors that would like to carry out those threats. I'd like to just briefly go over some of the basic types of threats that I would like to see the working group consider, some of the planning we may want to address, and also some use cases that we may want to consider in creating this report for the Commission. And also, yes, sir. A little closer?
Just because
okay.
I keep getting emails that there's a difficulty with hearing.
And I'm with April. I'm usually pretty easy to hear, but I will not use my Marine Corps drill deck voice, I promise.
We got a Marine over here that can help you with that.
I know we do, sir. Last I was trained to do that by the Navy, though, so that's kind of scary. So we have legacy systems out there that we are used to being comparatively secure. Closed-loop 911 networks and closed phone systems and CAD systems that don't have access to the Internet and record systems that belong to police and fire and EMS jurisdictions, and that's all about to change. And in fact, in some cases, it's already changed. Next generation systems are actually networks of networks. They're interconnected and they're interoperable, which is a tremendous opportunity for public safety and for our responders, and a tremendous challenge from the perspective of network security. Electrical engineers used to brag that we created weapons to destroy the targets that the civil engineers built. Unfortunately, electrical engineers are now creating targets, because the hackers and, in some cases, even nation states are able to infiltrate those complex networks and use them against us. Next generation systems will be no different. A network of networks that is IP-based faces all of the same vulnerabilities that any existing IP network faces. I can tell you from personal experience with a son and daughter in their 20s who love the Internet and who could probably not make a telephone call, but who will text 5,000 times a month, that data to them is normal ops, day to day, and voice is an afterthought. And that is a paradigm shift for public safety as well, and something we need to keep in mind. On the screen here is the simplified diagram of the Nina i3 next generation architecture. The real one is about 3 pages longer, and it wouldn't fit on one slide. This version of a next-gen network gives you kind of a look at the number of different inputs that 911 will now have to deal with. It used to be the landline phone and then the wireless phone, and as Mr. Souter and others have said, we got used to voice calls, then we got used to wireless calls, then we got used to VoIP calls, and now you can triple the number of inputs that we're going to have to deal with in real time using multimedia. No longer will the call taker simply answer the call. The telecommunicator of the future will have to deal with multimedia inputs, and they will become the first responder in more ways than we ever imagined. They will have to deal with seeing the fireground, the mass casualty incident. They will have to triage it, and they will have to use the data systems that we helped design to handle all of that. If they can't see it, if it's intruded on, if it's disrupted by cyber attacks, we become less effective. We may have better tools, but we won't be able to use them if we don't design the defense of those tools properly. So what types of threats are we talking about? These are basic. You can destroy the systems physically. We're pretty good at physical security. Cops and firefighters and those of us who've been in the military like defending physical structures, and we're pretty good at it. But you can also destroy facilities that are hubs for data, and you can do it electronically. Destruction of data and information and communications networks does not require destroying a building. You can corrupt the data. You can change the nature of the information. You can remove key pieces of data. There's a big difference between 123 North Main and 1 North Main. Send responders to the wrong place, you have no response. You can disclose information that would otherwise not be disclosed. We have CJIS, our Criminal Justice Information System. We have HIPAA-sensitive data. As the Admiral mentioned, PSAPs are more than just a call-taking facility. They are the nerve center of public safety. They become a command and control center through which all information flows. The public gets to public safety through the PSAP, and the responders get data from the public through the PSAP. Information inside that PSAP is critical, and if it is disclosed, it can corrupt criminal investigations, it can corrupt an actual response. It is dangerous. Interruption of the data, and perhaps something we're most used to dealing with in public safety. If I get in and corrupt your phone system and you can't talk to the victim, you cannot get an accurate picture of whatever is in progress. All of these are potential threats to our system, so how do we overcome them? We know that secure communications are a requirement for PSAPs. We also need to consider what secure means in the data world. There's a list here I'm not going to go through, but these things are things that NIST and DHS and the Bureau and the FCC have been talking about for years, and they include all kinds of areas that we have not typically had to deal with in public safety, especially when talking about voice. The integrity of our data and the integrity of our networks has to include things like voice, data, and video, and it has to include things like apps. We need to look at the high-level network requirements as well as the low-level device and identity management requirements in each and every one of our PSAPs and in all of our networks. We also may need to consider the fact that services may no longer be based on central premise equipment, but they may be provided by state, regional, or even national authorities. And we have to determine where we play and how we plug in and how we secure those systems. One of the things that I would ask that the group consider is building off of some use cases. In the standards world, we often work backwards. We reverse engineer the problem. We look at how the world works, and then we figure out how to keep the bad things from happening. So I've put a few examples, and that's all they are, of things that we might want to consider. We have seen some of these in the real world. A local cyber attack occurs. It can be of any kind, a TDOS or a DDoS or any of those catchwords that you hear. And it appears to be isolated. One PSAP reports it. But 48 hours later, we find out that 5 or 6 or 10 PSAPs have been hit. However, we find out through the grapevine, and as anyone in here who works in or runs a PSAP can tell you, that grapevine is really effective, and information travels really fast through that grapevine. But it doesn't travel fast enough for us to identify that in real time this event is occurring so that other PSAPs who might be hit can prevent it. However, we may have tools that we have at our disposal that we can use. Fusion centers, DHS, NCC, and NCIC. The Bureau itself has tools. The Commission has tools. There are state and federal agencies and authorities and tools available to us that we have not yet considered. How do we consolidate that information so that we find out that all 10 of those PSAPs were hit by the same actors using the same vector within a 24-hour period? And if we find out all of that information, how do we turn that into actionable intelligence that we can then use to prosecute and hopefully apprehend the individuals behind it? Another one, and I kept this simple for a reason because I think there's some room for open discussion. We have a statewide event. Could be anything. And it turns out behind that statewide event are nation-state actors. Not that any nation-states would have anything against any of our public safety agencies, but we know for a fact that we've been probed. And we know for a fact that all the way down to the mobile data terminal level in a squad car, nation-states have been able to gather information. They take multiple vectors, there are multiple actors, and they are much more agile in their capabilities to attack us than we are to respond right now. We need to look at that and figure out how and why they're better at it than we are and reverse that trend. And another thing is beyond disruption. What about a cyber attack that includes infiltration, corruption, and interruption of our data? We can have resources compromised. We can have information compromised. We can have resources misrouted. Take, for example, the recent tragedy in Washington, D.C. on the Metro. What if the information there had been intercepted and resources had been rerouted simply to the wrong line and they'd gotten there 15 minutes later? One fatality would not have been the outcome. And those things are very real in the world that we face today. I take the threat of cybersecurity very seriously. Obviously, so does everyone in this room. And I look forward to the opportunity to try to bridge this gap and build security DNA into our networks, because I really believe that that will set us up for success, and failure to do so could set us up for failure. So thank you again, and I look forward to working with everyone here.
Yeah, thank you, Jay. Can we go back to the slide with the is it the APCO reference diagram for cybersecurity for next to 911?
Yes, sir. Actually, we pulled that from the NENA i3 architecture as well. Yes, sir.
With apologies, Brian and Trey. One team, one fight, right? That's right. If you look at this is really how I used to look at information system security a couple of years back. I thought about you'll see the brick walls there representing firewalls, that it was about buying the right things as I built out my network to make sure that I could keep adversaries out. One of the wonderful things that the NIST cybersecurity risk management framework has done, it has helped us all pull back and recognize that cybersecurity is not the equipment you buy. It's really what you do. And in truth, at least at the federal level, and I'm quite sure the same exists at the corporate level, a significant majority of the dollars spent towards cybersecurity are not for the things that you see on this diagram. In fact, at the federal level, I've seen numbers that suggest that 5% of what makes up what organizations spend on cybersecurity is the things that make up cybersecurity. 95% goes towards workforce in one way or another, and that's the what you do piece. The cybersecurity framework divides the task into 5 elements, and if you look at this, you really focus on 2 of those elements. It's protect and defend, but protect and defend won't cover all that needs to be done. It really needs to start well ahead of the protect mission with the identify bin, and that's first identifying what is it you're trying to protect. In this case, continuity of communications, I believe, and then inside of that, the data itself is a protected element. But it's also identifying what are the threats, who would seek to affect a malicious outcome within a PSAP or first responder world, and then who would seek to gain advantage from a bit of information, maybe publicly identifiable information, PII, or some HIPAA information that might be advantageous. So identification is the first piece. Second, protect. The third, defend, and protect and defend are closely related. And the one you design how you do it, and the second you actually go through the people side of defending. But the last 2 are very important to consider as well, and that's respond and recover, because the days of thinking that an adversary won't get in your network are really over. You need to plan that, in fact, despite your best of intentions in the protect and defend phase, that those with malicious intent will get in your network. So ensuring that we can deliver as much capability as possible to our served public, even when that should happen, means that we need to think about that response phase. And ensure that we look at things like, I used to call it attack damping, but ensuring that while you may have a negative impact, you can at least get the basics done with a degraded set of operations. And the final area, recover. How do you cleanse your network afterwards and regain confidence that, in fact, adversaries are out of your network once compromised? If you don't think about those other 3 areas as we're looking at the optimal architecture for cyber, then we'll suboptimize really around the wrong point. Jay, I thank you very much for taking on this task, and you've got a number of experts in the task force to pull from for that, but also, as with the other working groups, we have the ability to ask some subject matter experts in the field to contribute in answers to questions that the working group may have. So don't be shy in asking for us to pull together additional expertise. Thanks, Jay.
David, if you don't mind, into the task force. First of all, to Jay, thank you for a very clear, concise overview about what the task of your working group is all about. I would also suggest that it was mentioned earlier that we're on the brink of the 47th anniversary of 911. So it took us 47 years to get where we are today. We don't have that luxury in the future. We literally have to go into high gear ASAP at all working levels of this task force and perhaps others that we draw into this effort, if you will. I would suggest to you, and I've made this point a couple of times in opportunities that I've had, if you could foresee 10 years into the future, the only thing about 911 that will be the same in 10 years as it is today is the number 911. Literally everything will be different. EZNet, GIS, we all know where that factors into. So we're on the brink of a revolution in technology, as well as the opportunity to have a corresponding revolution into the way in which 911 at the industry level, at the end user level, and at the subscriber level are provided and protected against and delivered. Thank you. And next will be Phil Jones, and Phil will be talking about his working group task.
If I could exercise a privilege here, I was going to cover for David Hall because he's not in, and I've got to step out at 3. So if I could just cover the architecture piece real quick. The first element around the architecture task that David and I talked about really was very glad that Commissioner O'Reilly brought this up because he has charged us with really taking on the most ambitious of thoughts about, well, what could we do with optimizing or shrinking the number of PSAPs. So I don't think our job will be complete if we don't answer the question, could it be one PSAP per state? And before everyone falls back to, whoa, that could never be, and I'm worried about that. If we don't touch upon the pros and cons of that, we'll fall short of the task. And that last discussion around cyber, I think, to me, represents a real opportunity to help us challenge this. It may be that while there are a number of very good reasons why a single PSAP may not be the right model for a state, it may be that there's lots of people and dispatchable resource reasons why that continues to be distributed. It may be that the cyber for PSAPs in a state might rely on a single PSAP cyber capability that is more efficient and more effective in looking at the anomalous indicators throughout a state's PSAPs. So I think this architecture group can also look at that, while Jay's group is looking at how one would best defend. The architecture group should look at, okay, given that those are all the things that need to be done to cover the 5 phases as spelled out in the NIST framework, how do we take those essential elements into the other essential functions that PSAPs have to meet? So the second element that we want to make sure we cover in the architecture piece is the improved functionality and to challenge the status quo around, as Steve really said, well, 10 years from now, the only thing that will be common in 911 will be the number 911. That if you bring in the new functionality, will that also perhaps have economies of scale, or look at the other side of this? Is there a benefit from a greater understanding of community that before you never could have effectively or efficiently supported a touch point for a PSAP in a smaller element of a community, that looking at the new ways with IP that you can actually support communities, it could be that you get greater functionalities into smaller communities than you could before. So we expect the architecture group to develop recommendations there. That should include a large range of existing PSAP use cases. So we would hope that the architecture group pulls upon examples from all across the country, both in large urban all the way down to rural examples. The projected costs and transition periods associated with optimized configurations. So there's real risk in the transition, and those of you that are working the NG 911 dream right now, you know there was one in Texas that was described to me when they first stood up their ESI net. They had more, and I'm going to goon the example, and Mary, don't hit me if I get it too wrong. But as it was represented to me, there were more 911 failures in 9 months in the Council of Governments supported by that particular effort than there had been in the entire history of 911 before then. And it really it stabilized rapidly after that. They got after it, and now they enjoy much better availability of 911. But it's representative of the fact that transitions do introduce risk factors that need to be mitigated. So we'd like the architecture to look at that aspect of resiliency. Improving access for people with disabilities. That's one of the most exciting things about functionality that I've been looking at recently, is to how we can better serve those that may not have the use of all the senses in the manner that many Americans enjoy. Finally, as we look at the best practices for legacy PSAPs, the CSRIC in the past looked deeply at those best practices, and I want to encourage the architecture group to not begin again on all the elements of this particular task, to draw upon prior work so that we're really not duplicating that prior work, but instead taking it to the next level and working on the gaps there. I'd also encourage the group, and this applies to all the working groups, to look at the CSRIC as a body that might do follow-on work. So if you think about the task force effort, in some cases you won't be providing answers, you'll be teeing up more effective questions so that other bodies can work on a longer, more substantive way to get solutions in place. And as Tim mentioned earlier, first report due to the task force September 2015.
Thank you, David. Before we move off that topic, and you heard Commissioner O'Reilly speak to the number of PSAPs that we have today. I think he said about 5,900 and somewhere between 5 and 6. A lot of times I have been asked, how did we ever get to where we are now? And to understand that, you have to go back 40 plus years. And shortly after 911 was brought forward, there was a strong effort by the federal government to push it out to the community. And in an effort to do that, through an organization that existed then under the Department of Justice, it was called the Law Enforcement Assistance Administration. And they were charged with making 911 available. And they literally said, in all good intent, to the law enforcement community, sheriffs, police chiefs, etc., who wants a 911 system? And roughly 6,000 hands went up. And that's how we got to where we are now. Well, that was then, and this is now, and that's part of our tasking. Thank you.
Thanks.
Well, I guess can you hear me? Okay. I guess I get to go clean up. I don't have slides like Jay did. Jay, nice job on those slides. That was beautiful. I like that. So I just have a few thoughts, and I'd like to hear from you around the table today. The way I see Working Group 3 working out is both a top-down approach. We have $2.4 billion to spend nationally on this effort if you take the FCC numbers in their 6th report. That's a lot of money. You know, that's kind of similar to universal service funds, at least one portion of that $4 billion plus bucket. that we send out to carriers to provide universal service, about half of that. So it's a big amount of money, but as all of you know in the room, this is all built up from the local governments up to the state governments, and it's not a national number. It's kind of a fictional number to think of this nationally, in my view. So in my work, what I've been thinking so far is the first thing we need to look at is kind of a baseline of what are the statutes and regulations that govern 911 in the states. NARUC has done a little bit of work, maybe NASDA's done some work, maybe APCO's done some work, so I'm going to be talking to APCO, NASDA, and try to get a compilation that's pretty comprehensive of statutes and regulations, because as a commissioner, and I think Commissioner O'Reilly would have to affirm this too, he has to first look at the statutes and the regulations that govern the FCC. And all of us at the state level, whether you're a PUC commissioner, a governor, a CIO, a legislator, you have to look at what statutes and regulations there are. Then we want to look at, I think we need to put on the table, I think someone mentioned it, these governance gaps. I think, Steve, you may have mentioned that, or somebody else, where we, at some point in this mix of things we're going to have to look at, you know, what states do, what local governments do, what the FCC does, and where are the gaps. The way I see this working out is in terms of budget scenarios, and I'm just, I would appreciate some feedback from the members on this. There would be a business as usual case, a BAU case, so where we go with that $2.4 billion, break it among the 50 states plus DC, plus the tribes. We're going to have to bring the tribes in here actively. So that'd be kind of a business as usual case. The second case would be kind of an accelerated evolution case, you know, speed it up a bit. Third case would be what Commissioner O'Reilly or somebody said is kind of a radical, dramatic one PSAP per state case, one PSAP per country. If that's going to be on the table, I don't know how I'm going to get at the efficiencies that would produce, but maybe some of you have some numbers, some analysis that we could look at to try to get at what the efficiencies are. If the commission really wants us to look at it, we need to look at it. And we do this all the time in the electricity space and the natural gas space. We do scenario planning. That takes a lot of resources sometimes, so I don't know exactly how this working group is going to pull it together. Another scenario, and I think Dave just mentioned this, is additional functionality. So I don't know how we're going to get at that, but additional functionality costs money, right? So we're probably going to have an additional functionality case. So I see us spending some time on scenarios. Then we have these 50 states. They're all different. We'll look at specifically at the fee structure. I don't think we need to spend a lot of time on fee structure. It's outlined pretty well in the reports of the FCC. Some states have a hybrid fee structure of a state fee of anywhere from 19 cents per access line to $1, and then local authorities climb onto that with an additional fee. Some states don't have that approach at all. So we're going to have to do an inventory of those approaches, some analysis. Mehrdad, you mentioned the Internet of Things, sensors. I don't know how that would work, but I think we need to be a little creative. So I'll be looking at creative ideas on what additional funding sources other than putting a fee on an access line would be. Incentives to discourage fee diversion. And I don't know how we're going to get at this, but we'll be a little creative here. My state is on the bad guys list now, if you want to call it a bad guys list that Commissioner O'Reilly talked about, and others are mentioned in the report. This is not something, in my experience, that states or state legislators or governors like to do, but I'll be curious to hear from People in Illinois and Rhode Island and New York, I've already started some conversations with those states that have diverted funds. Usually, I think what we'll find is because of the statutes and the regulations in that state, and because of budget shortfalls, and because of other necessities, it's not a first choice or a second choice, but perhaps a third choice that these funds have been diverted. But how to set up a carrot and a stick approach here, I think we're going to have to look at a carrot and a stick and go through some alternatives or what a carrot and stick might look at. So that's kind of a sensitive discussion, but, I'm not one to shy away from sensitive type discussions. Then I think besides the carrot and stick approach, I'm really going to be interested in outreach to both legislators, governors, CIOs, maybe through national associations, and this is where maybe Brian, I'll talk to you at NENA and Jay at APCO. I mean, I think we're involved with NCSL and perhaps NGA and the RGA, the Republican governors, the Democratic governors, but perhaps there's some, once we get some approach with business cases and various scenarios, maybe it's time we'll do a little bit of outreach to those groups, because I really believe that if you come up with a list of best practices, a list of scenarios, and you talk about the challenges and the opportunities in the new system, rather than coming out with a stick right away or even an incentive right away, a little bit of outreach and education, I think would be a good thing. And then we have the tribes, and Brian of the Navajo tribe talked about the tribes. I mean, he said he operates in 3 states. How many counties? 11 counties.
11 counties.
I don't know how I'm going to get at that issue, but Brian, I'm going to be looking to you and some of your colleagues for some counsel on tribal E911 networks. What, if you don't have an operational PSAP, how do you get one? How do you work with your 911 authorities or the PSAPs in New Mexico and Arizona and Colorado? And there are other tribes as well. I don't know how I'm going to get at the broader tribal picture, but I'm sure I can find a way with committee members to do that. So those are some, and then at the end of this, what I foresee happening is some sort of, and I'm going to need some input from each of the other 2 working groups, right? Because if the architectural group comes up with either great costs or great efficiencies, I need to feed that into the what all this is going to cost. So it's going to be kind of a team effort. I'm going to be reaching out to the other 2 working groups and try to do this in a collaborative or an iterative way. So, Steve, those are some initial thoughts I have.
Phil, thank you for your remarks and the insightfulness that goes beyond them. We're at that point of the agenda where it's appropriate that the FCC come back to the microphone to share with us some of the nuance that go with being a task force. So today the FCC is represented by somebody that I've heard speak on this topic before, very knowledgeable and very engaging, and that is Paula Silberthal.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'm not sure how engaging, but I'll do my best. I'll do my best.
Pretty good. Their heads are all still erect. So, yeah.
Don't fall asleep. So these little talks I give are short, but let me just explain why they're potentially important. Because you guys are important, your recommendations are important, and there are cases out there that where people have challenged rules or other things that people have tried to do based on recommendations of advisory committees. And if the advisory committee inadvertently goose and there's a rule violation, something's not done according to the Federal Advisory Committee Act, then a lot of times people say we can't listen to your recommendations, and in some cases that's caused rules to be rescinded, actually, or proceedings to be started from scratch and the advisory committee to have to meet again from scratch, and obviously you don't want that here. So that's why this matters a little bit. So I'll say some stuff just to give an overview of FACA real quick, and then the things that actually probably matter in terms of implementation. So the Federal Advisory Committee is in 5 U.S.C. Appendix 2, and it gives general information about the formation, when you have to form advisory committees and what you do. And the guiding principles are openness in government, balanced views, diversity, which I think is met here, and public accountability. And meetings are announced in advance so the public can attend if they are interested. That doesn't mean that anyone from the public who is in attendance is allowed to speak, but it gives people a chance to hear things firsthand. And if there's time left and it makes sense, to allow people to even make comments. All of the documents you use, we need to retain, and they're publicly available. Without a FOIA or anything, it's just they're kept and they're retained, and anyone who wants to can look at them. The chair, your chair and your vice chair are sort of your designated federal officer are sort of your focal points. If you have ideas, it should go through them in terms of agendas and meetings and schedules, things like that. They help put all that stuff together. The duty of the designated federal officer, is that you, Dave? Tim. They're actually sort of statutory and in regs. So he's extremely important.
Let me just emphasize, this is Tim, that Paula has forgotten more about FACA than I will ever know. So I'm going to need her constant
But I know
guidance.
nothing substantive, so, that's bad. So Tim gets to call the meetings. Tim gets to work with you guys and then approve the agendas. Tim should be attending the meetings, which he's doing. He can close the meetings. He could even chair them if he wanted to. Tim will make sure that all the committee records are assembled and maintained and help with doing the minutes. So he's an important guy. And if you have any questions, he's the one to call, not me. But now to the thing that really matters. The informal working groups or subcommittees are actually envisioned under the GSA regs. And they're supposed to be preparatory. They're supposed to be information gathering. And because it's just information gathering under the regs, the working groups can meet privately. They should meet privately, not be open to the public. This is sometimes controversial, but this is not unique to the FCC. This is all working groups for all FACAs everywhere in government. And you can gather information, you can develop working plans, and usually our working groups are tasked with making recommendations and presenting information. The thing to keep in mind, and sometimes people forget this because it's not intuitive, is that the working group recommendations are just that. They're your recommendations of a small group of you to the full committee. And everyone needs to be careful if you're talking about this to someone to not say by accident, oh, our committee, meaning all of you here, have decided to recommend X, Y, and Z when it's only the working group. Because everything that the working group does in terms of recommendations has to be fully reviewed by all of you and debated. It can't be rubber stamped, because if it's rubber stamped, then the working group gets converted into a parent group, and that would be bad because the working groups meet privately. So if the working group were actually a parent group and met privately, that would be a FACA violation. So in all of our federal advisory committees, there were real debates and discussions about the content of the recommendations, and they're not just said, okay, we got it, I want to have a vote on the ayes and nays. They're really, that's sort of a key point. And related to that is that the working group recommendations before they're reviewed by all of you cannot be submitted directly by the working group chair to the commissioners or anything, because these are, I'm not trying to belittle the working groups. They're great, but it's only a working group recommendation until it's been adopted and debated by the full group. And not recently the FCC, but other agencies have had that problem because people didn't understand and they turn them into like the head of HHS or something, and then that's wrong. So it doesn't mean anything until you present it to your group and vote on it. And then if it's great and everyone agrees on it, it can be appended with a cover letter from the chair of your group saying we voted on this and we agree with this and here's like all the analysis and we think this is great, or you might decide to change it. So that is really the major reason I'm standing here, is just so you can understand that distinction. The other thing that I don't think would happen here is that occasionally individual members or the chairman of the group have gotten out in front of the rest of you and said, we're working on this and I'm sure we're going to come up with this recommendation. So that's also, not good. I know you won't. I know you won't do that, Steve. But that has actually happened before. Or we've had situations where people have done blogs and they've said, my view is this, and I am the chairman of X, Y, and Z task force, and it looked as though this were the official view of the task force and of the group. And in fact, in this particular case I'm thinking of, it was a minority view. The person who wrote it was the only one who had that view, but by writing this made it, and it might have been in total good faith, but made it seem as though that was the view of the broader group, and in fact almost made it seem like it was the view of the FCC. So, if someone were to ask you questions about, work in progress, it might be good to defer them, but if someone just says, what's your individual view, to make sure that, it's clear, it's your, individual view, so it doesn't get run with as an official agency position before it's even been presented. So I think those are the major things. Something that probably won't arise with this group, but I guess it could, unlikely, is ex partes. My understanding is that you're not working on things that are being considered in a pending proceeding or rulemaking. But it's possible that debate could get into something that was pending, and Dave and Tim will stay on the alert for that, because if you wander into it just in the natural course and you're giving views, which are perfectly fine, that are about a pending rulemaking, then our ex parte rule would be triggered. And either you folks whoever did the talking, or Tim or David on your behalf would need to submit a brief ex parte. So the point being that just because you're part of a federal advisory committee, it doesn't toll the ex parte rules. They still exist. So if you're concerned you said something peripheral at the meeting that is something that were the subject of another pending rulemaking, just let Tim know and he could help you even file the ex parte. So I think that's about it. Do you guys have any questions on... one other thing. Substitutes. Normally, and I don't know whether there was time to put that together for this group, but normally there's like an alternate member who's approved in advance by our ethics team and approved by the chair, so that if you can't attend, you would just let people know in advance that you were having the alternate come. If for any reason you don't have an alternate for your organization, number one, it might be good to get that, to think about who it would be, if you're just sick and couldn't come to the meeting, because whoever attends should sort of go through our very brief ethics screening process, and Tim and David should know who it is. So I would ask that maybe it's a hassle, but consider doing that if you haven't sort of an approved alternate. And for those of you who are the chairs of the task forces, some of the people on the task forces might be members of a task force, but not members of the larger group.
You mean the working groups?
The working groups, yeah. I don't know whether that's true here, but like if you were the chair and you had sort of a working group member who wasn't part of the larger group, that would be okay as long as they were appointed. But they would also, if that person couldn't attend the working group meeting and wanted to send an alternate, it's the same process. So that just means that, we avoid conflicts of interest and things like that. I think that's it.
Okay.
Any questions?
I have a question about the difference, if there is any, between emails that I send the working group chair that do or don't copy commission employees. Are there any differences with regard to FOIA or disclosure of those, or are they all handled identically?
I'm not sure. Any emails that you would send to about business of this group, it's good to copy the DFO on all of them, and they become part of the archives for this group and publicly available. Does that? Okay.
And the reason I say to work on that issue as we go forward.
The reason I say to include Tim is not that I'm trying to blow his storage capacity on his inbox, but it's just good because that way Tim knows when the meetings are being held, and if there's a scheduling issue, he's aware of it.
This is Tim. Admittedly, it does get complicated based on my experience working on CISRIC and being a liaison for those working groups. So, but we'll get through this together with respect to documentation. So, are you
okay?
Okay. So, Steve, I just had a few. Thank you, Paula. I just wanted to go over a couple points, and then I'll let you get back to. First, so your working group chairs will be contacting you going forward, and also seeking. Again, we started the process of trying to identify which particular working group you had an interest in participating on. So we're going to continue that, and we can hopefully lock that down in the next week or so, next week or two. But you will be hearing from working group chairs seeking your participation on one of the working groups. Liaison. So an FCC employee will be assigned to the working group, and we'll announce who those individuals are in the next week or two as well. This year, for this particular task force, we're looking at having legal representation as well as technical expertise. So not just a single point of contact, but possibly two. And I am your designated federal officer. Any questions, please direct them to my attention. If it's a working group specific issue, chairs, again, that's where the liaison comes into play. But again, if you have any questions, concerns, do not hesitate to reach out to me directly. Paula just mentioned, if you have an alternate in mind, the sooner you get me that name and their bio, then I can start to funnel those individuals' names up to our Office of General Counsel, and they will go through the exact same process that each of you went through as far as that vetting process. That is absolutely essential, and for every individual who participates on the task force in any working group, no ifs, ands, or buts. So nobody can participate on a working group, on a phone call, unless they have been approved and vetted through our Office of General Counsel. It's very important. And then lastly, our next meeting will be late April, per the Commission's requirement that we begin reporting out to them on the progress that's being made. And we'll get into some more detail on that, and we'll start to share some possible dates with you. In some instances, it may come down to when this particular room is available to host this large group of people. So those were my 5 points. I'd like to, yes, Lori Flaherty from NHTSA.
A question. Because we didn't know what the working groups were going to be, I've already thought of a couple of names of, say, a couple of state 911 coordinators whose past experience would be really helpful. So would this task force, in terms of the working groups, be like the CISRA groups in terms of the possibility of adding others using the same process, or would you? I mean, I don't want it to be a cast of thousands, obviously.
But that's absolutely right. That is. We view these working groups as sort of mini versions of the CISRIC approach. Some of the working groups on CISRIC, there were 100 plus members. That is unwieldy for this particular task. I don't think we want to go down that path. But there's a lot of expertise out there that we need to leverage. So please do not hesitate to nominate working groups. Do not hesitate to nominate individuals. If you are assigned to a working group, then please funnel those names through your working group chair, and we'll get them vetted as well as we can. Any other process questions? Any questions on the bridge with respect to process? Okay, I will turn it back to our chair, Steve Sauter.
Thank you, Tim. And before I go any further, and excuse me if it was not introduced by anybody before, but I do want to introduce formally David Simpson's deputy, who is David Firth. David is another FCC staff member that is keenly aware of our issues and has been extraordinarily helpful in working with in a number of ways. So, David, thank you for being here, and we appreciate all that you have brought to the table.
Thank you, Steve. I am doing today something that I try to do as often as possible when surrounded by so many people with such a vast wealth of experience, which is to listen rather than talk. And I am looking forward to working with this group and listening and learning from all of the valuable work that you are going to be doing. Thank you.
And Paula, if you're back in your office now, you scooted away so quickly, I didn't have the opportunity to say thank you on my behalf and behalf of the task force members as well. But I think that now that you've heard her make her presentation, which she has done many, many times, how knowledgeable she is and how much of a resource she will be to ensure that all of us conduct ourselves as members of this task force and working groups and the others that we may bring into the fold in a way that is respectful of all of the both federal and FCC requirements in that regard. I would, before we move off the issue of the working groups, I have no idea, and probably you don't either now, how you'll organize, whether you'll find a need to meet, all of those kinds of things. But should you have a need to meet and want to do it anywhere in the National Capital Region, unless there is a prohibition against it, I would want you to know that you're welcome to meet in a private location within my facility, which is very close to Dulles Airport from a convenience standpoint, if you need to do that, right? We're right on target with the time, which is really a credit to everybody. But I do want to just kind of open it up for any general comments that anybody may have. And I see Brian's got his hand up already. Thank you, Brian.
I hate to be the one standing between trains, planes, and automobiles to get out of here. But there's just a couple of observations that I've made during the presentations, and I very much appreciate the presentations of the working group chairs. One of the things that Commissioner Jones mentioned, the $2.4 billion, but that were the case. If I'm correct in this, it's $2.4 billion that's generated in 911 fees. And of that, not $2.4 billion actually trickled down into the 911 centers. There's a number of entities that take their tab before it even gets to the center itself. And then that asks the broader question, do we stick with the traditional means of funding 911, or do we look at alternative approaches to funding 911? And if so, what would they be? So that kind of ties into that funding issue. And then in the cybersecurity world, it's not easy. We raised an issue that originated in California about 2 years ago, immediately brought it to the attention of the folks at DHS, which the only thing that related to 911 and the cyber part of this was the fact that there was a 911 call made without anybody even knowing that a 911 call was made from their wireless device, and immediately it went to the networks that provision 911 before it even got to 911. And those types of cybersecurity issues that extend beyond just the 911 center have profound impact on how the centers will work or not work in response to emergency. And that's it.
Thank you, Brian. Anyone else? Yes. Brad.
I was trying to keep my mouth shut, but I felt like I might propagate the Marine Corps stereotype and ask some dumb questions. That's supposed to be a joke. I don't know. I lost my audience over here with the Admiral leaving, so I have to see if I can stand by. I'm sitting here and I appreciate it. It's great to get some context. So I appreciate the presentations, and I've been on a few of these, and I've throughout my careers we've built the standards around a lot of this stuff and looked at how we've not either created something from greenfield or bettered something or both, and so I always try to start with why. You look at the opportunity we have and why we're doing it, and I would appreciate if you wouldn't mind maybe just spending a few minutes on kind of painting the picture of what the optimal outcome could be, because I'm a little bit cloudy on what our goal versus like the order in which we're doing it. Because I was whispering to Mary and I said, there's an architecture goal, there's a cybersecurity goal, and then I'm not clear on the timing of each. Do you secure the networks today? Do you optimize the networks today? Do you build a new architecture and secure that? Do you how do you gauge what success would be measured for this group, and what is the measurement of like the pace at which that would go? So I would appreciate if maybe we could all level set on what, and maybe you guys have. I just didn't hear a very good plan to say what in April do you want to see? What do we do first? What do you want to, that's kind of what I would appreciate. Maybe we could just have some level setting on that.
I think with any task, it's good to know what the deliverables are, what the expectations are, what the timelines are. I cannot speak to that personally, but I would direct your question, well stated, to Tim, and maybe Tim can elaborate a little bit to give us a little more structure to the guidance that we're going to be working under.
Yeah, thanks, Brad. I think in the first instance, indeed, the Commission did direct us, or direct the task force, I should say, to report back in April of 2015. However, given the scope of the issues confronting the task force as outlined by the Commission, we have viewed that as an interim report. And as you see with the working groups, we've defined sort of 6 and 9 month periods within which to sort of lock down the basics, the fundamentals of these three core areas. So really the April timeframe, we're looking at most likely interim reporting. Where have you gotten? How far have you gotten? And again, this is subject to further discussion with the working groups, but I think that's the most realistic place that we can be in the April timeframe. Otherwise, we're not going to have the substantive work product that we know you are capable of delivering. As we move forward, as far as the three pieces and how do they interconnect, again, if you look at this, you have to break it apart. You have to look at each individually and then bring the resources to bear that you can. We believe that the cyber piece really does need to be emphasized up front, but again, it's something that's going to take a little bit longer to get there. So I think we see them being units of a cohesive whole, that optimal PSAP, that optimal facility with state and local considerations designed, factored into it, and that's, I think, where we're the direction that we've been asked to take this to help the task force get to. David, I don't know if you have any additional ideas on that.
Well, I just add one sort of fundamental thing, which is the Commission does not regulate PSAPs. So this is not the sort of inquiry where we're saying to you, come up with recommendations that will then lead to the Commission potentially adopting regulations that implement those recommendations. I think in here the purpose is a little bit different. The issues that the Commission is confronting with respect to next generation 911, which from a jurisdictional point of view largely involve our relationship not with PSAPs but with service providers who we do regulate, can't take place in a vacuum. And in order for the Commission to have a better understanding of the right policy choices to make in the areas that are within our jurisdiction, it's important to have an understanding of how do the other parts of the ecosystem, and the PSAPs are really the most critical part of the ecosystem. That is where the rubber meets the road when it comes to 911. That's where the call needs to go. That's where the response needs to be generated. That is what this is all about. And so I think that we see the task force as something that will inform us in very profound ways, even if it is dealing with aspects of the 911 system that are not directly within our regulatory purview. I think there's also an opportunity for the task force itself, just by virtue of bringing this diverse array of people with such experience in the 911 community, to generate recommendations that may be relevant beyond the FCC. There's an opportunity here. It's not simply to do the things that we have tasked you with doing, but perhaps to see where those questions, those tasks could potentially lead, because this could ultimately be a tool. And again, I think of CISRIC as an analogous example. Some of what CISRIC does informs Commission regulations, but a great deal of what CISRIC does is to develop recommendations, best practices for industry. And I think there's the same opportunity here for this task force to generate recommendations that will also benefit all of the jurisdictions that those in the PSAP community represent, and to provide recommendations that can benefit everybody really in the 911 ecosystem. So I think that's the other aspect of the task force's mission that I think is an opportunity. That you have the ability not only to take the things that the homework we've given you, but to also, I think, shape the questions that you think it's important for us to be thinking about, and for others in the 911 ecosystem to be thinking about. So I would in some ways turn it back to you and say these are great questions, but you should feel free to also come up with what you think are the right answers to those questions.
Yeah, I think about kind of just the pathway to get there. Really just a mindset issue of saying, okay, well, do you take where you are as a baseline and build on top, or do you take where you want to go and come back from there? Because I think there's a vision of where we have, when we say optimal, you see the end game, and then you talk about where you are. And there's history that I think we've all seen examples, and I won't waste our time going through the myriad in my head of examples of where we've taken legacy systems and just bolted on new technology, and that's not the most optimal thing to do. And so I wonder if our task here is that, bolting things on, or really reinventing things, or some kind of combination of the two. And so that's where, if we're giving me the opportunity to talk, to throw that out there, that's what I would challenge us to really look at and see, can we have a conversation, or can we be open to reinventing versus doing this? Because, you're right, there's a service provider aspect to this that really impacts the space, and you have mobile service providers, but you also have landline service providers, and that in an IP context, in a place where we start to convert over or maybe convert back, the landline guys may be even more relevant, or they may see more opportunity. But people are cutting the cord and they're only having mobile phones, and that becomes where people do it. And you may see social media as a place where people are doing it. I buy into all that. That's it might be Facebooking my way to 911. I don't know, maybe, but regardless of what that is, do you start from down here and build on top of what you used to do? And I mean, your comment, I think, was really great. I'm going to go home and talk about that tonight, about 10 years from now, 911 won't be anything but 911. I mean, I think that's great. So what does that look like? And why bother sitting here trying to build that bridge if we know we're going to be there? Let's just build that. If we only have $2.4 billion, or a quarter, or whatever tax you're taking out. So that's my commentary on that. I don't know if anybody disagrees or agrees, or it doesn't make any sense. These groups are tough to get any read on people.
No, this is Tim. These are exactly the questions that we're hoping that you all will have a discussion with each other about.
Okay.
Because these are the questions that directly impact the public safety community. We've brought you together to work out those issues and to make a set of recommendations for yourselves, essentially. And in David Simpson's opening remarks, he discussed the deep technical expertise, et cetera. But the last part he mentioned was the creativity, and there's going to need to be a lot of that going forward, and I think a lot of that will need to be reflected in these sets of recommendations that you bring to each other and vote on and present to the Commission.
Okay.
Thank you, Brad, and thank you, Tim.
Sir.
Anyone else? Bob?
I guess to elaborate a little bit more on Brad's comment, and actually Mr. Jones had touched on it when he was talking about his working group. Maybe just be the way my mind works. I think if we're going to design the architecture, and that's kind of where you start, and then the next part. I don't know how you are going to design a good cybersecurity if you don't know the architecture first. And then obviously the finance guys need to know both those components before they can figure out what the finance is going to be.
Indeed,
so how this all comes together.
Right, but if you remember what Chief Simpson said, he said it's not necessarily defending art off the bat. What is it you're looking to defend? So again, you're designing architecture, and at the same time, is that the piece you want to defend? Do you control that piece to defend, et cetera? So there's a construct there that can now be applied as you begin to map out both that facility, the physical elements, the virtual elements, the operational pieces, and now you have you layer in the defend, protect, et cetera, associated with the NIST framework. I'm not saying it moves in concert beautifully, but it's a challenge that I'm pretty sure that you can take these tools and begin to map out the dependencies between each.
Thank you.
Thank you again, Robert and Tim. And they draw my attention to Brian's hand again. And
I think a lot of this is not necessarily reinventing the wheel in the architecture sense, since a lot of the architecture is done. And I know in the NG 911 diagram, there is a whole cybersecurity section, and it has been compared to what NIST recommendations are. There are improvements that have to be made. But some of the things I think, that in addition to let's take an assessment of where we are, is that there are so many other facets going to the protect, defend, and restore, or respond, if you will, that go beyond just the 911 center or the ESI net or any larger governmental entity managing 911. And I think we have to identify those elements. And going back to your point, Brad, is what are we about? How are we starting this? And what we've done in our working groups, I'm looking over here to my cohort in crime, Laurie Flaherty and Cicerich, we actually, as a working group, developed the co-chairs of the working group developed subcommittees that then helped formulate specific questions, and then rotated as those questions were answered, went on to the next question, and so forth, to make it very bite-sized, manageable, if you will, in the work product that was produced. And so that may be one of the primary functions of the working groups when they meet, is to help identify some very specific questions that go to either the broader context, do we look at the end product and build down from there, or do we look at where existing infrastructure design and implementation is, and build up from there. And that could be addressed, I think, a large part in the first meeting of the working group itself.
Jay?
From the cyber perspective, the Admiral maneuvered his frigate behind my troop transport, and I'm trying to shake it right now because he mentioned something that I left out kind of for a reason. 95% of what we're looking at, and this has been documented, and NIST did a very good job of talking about this, is not the boxes. It's the people that operate the boxes, and it's other aspects of the system. When we talk about an optimal PSAP architecture, we're not just talking about the brick and mortar. We're not even just talking about the fiber versus the copper. We're really talking about an operational picture, and there's a reason that that might want to be highlighted at a later date when we dig deep into the weeds at the working group level. We're all used to physical security, and I did mention that, and we're all good at it. This is not physical security. This is cybersecurity, and it's a different look. And I think we can incorporate some of what we're doing in cyber before the architecture, but then we also need to come back and validate after that architecture picture is complete. What is the cyber picture? Where does the cyber fit in, and what do we miss? Because we're going to miss something, whether it's the telecommunicator not being allowed to use an instant messenger at a position that they didn't think was connected to the rest of the network when it was. And I say that because it happens every day, and they open up ports that suddenly allow a virus to intrude the network, and they thought it was safe, and it's suddenly not. Or whether it's a firewall and how you configure it. But again, that 90 to 95% is not the box. It's the people that operate the box and the security of our system overall, not just the equipment. So that was a valid point that I was going to sneak in the working group level, but the Admiral beat me to it. So,
to the point that Jay just brought up, I think, well, certainly that there's a overlap or an interdependency on what the architecture group does. There's similarly a governance element to this. In many jurisdictions, the infrastructure, the transport infrastructure that the ESINet runs over includes equipment that doesn't come under the purview of the PSAP director. It quite often is the CIO for the county or some other CIO element. So I think, to Brian's point, sometimes the best outcome of one of these task forces is a really good question, and parts of this passed over to the governance group that would suggest, and I'll just posit two extremes. One would say that no, in order for PSAPs really to secure their infrastructure and to be accountable for resiliency and reliability, then we've got to have such an architecture that public safety communicators are responsible end-to-end for every element that gets touched. Another extreme would be no, public safety communications need to be able to swim in a much larger sea of transport capabilities. So we should really look at something like a standard for the tunnels, and we cryptographically isolate, but come up with more options should there be a CIO that fails at his task at the county level, that there's a degree of minimally essential communications that still exists for the PSAP. I think that part of this is generating good questions around the goalpost of the extremes.
Mary.
Just one more comment about the whole governance model. Politics aside, because that was a major player in why we have almost 6,000 PSAPs. Operationally, a lot of our statutes and their funding still put the dollars there at the local government. So, Commissioner Jones, there's been a lot of studies done the last 5 years over what does 911 funding look like. And so I think we can pull some of those. I know I've got a spreadsheet that sort of shows where the dollars flow. I think we have to understand that in terms of how it's governed as we look in partnership with the technical architecture team, because they can design anything. It's the policy elements of it and how that has to change to support an optimized network when most of the wireline service fees are going to local government.
Thank you, Mary. Lori?
I don't see how you get away from the government's element when you're talking about architecture. Ultimately, it's a tool to be used as those who see fit choose to use it, and generally, that is somehow impacted by governance. I don't know how you separate it. So I think it'll overlap. It'll come out in the second group as well as the third group. I mean, God love you. You got who's in charge and who's going to pay for it in your group. And
you're welcome ahead of time.
I know. But I can't see how you separate them. I agree with you.
Yeah, they're going to walk hand in hand with one another.
Yeah.
I don't overlook our members that are on the teleconference. Are there any comments from the field?
Yeah, this is Tom Breen. I've been listening intently. I have just a question, and I hope I didn't miss it because I think I was listening intently. Do we have any scope yet as to like what the working group work schedules will be, and is the assumption that most of the work will take place over teleconferencing, web conferencing?
This is Tim May. Yeah, that's an excellent question, Tom. Generally, that is at the discretion of the working group chair. Again, the working group got together; they'll determine the scope of the work based on how what the commission's asked. If you look at CISRIC's approach and those working groups, in some instances, as they get closer to report due time, you might see them meeting once or twice via teleconference, usually once or twice a week. Generally, there's use of web-based document editing, or one or two individuals will take control of the document based on notes. Again, it's really dependent upon the dynamic within the working group. As long as we get our recommendation, our voted on recommendation, how you want to organize that is really up to the chair of the working group. So that I'll leave it at that. But we do not require you to meet once a week. Again, it's what's the product, what's expected, when do you need to deliver it, and what do you as professionals think is required to get there.
Okay, one follow-up. When do we take action to, I guess I'll use this phrase, to declare our interest in serving on any given particular working group or more than one?
Tom, this is Tim again. You can send that to me directly, and I'll share it with the working group chairs.
Yeah, primary and alternate.
Yes, we're looking for primary and alternate preference.
Anyone else? Tim, thank you for the. I'll perceive it as the latitude that you give the working groups. It's nice to be able to operate in a structure that has that level of latitude, and we will do right by you.
Yes, Steve, I will pull the rug out from under you when I assign the liaisons. So at that point.
Okay.
Steve, sorry, it's Brad.
Brad.
If it's helpful, I'd be happy to volunteer to help set up the online stuff. If that's helpful, I can raise my hand for that.
That could be very helpful. Again, this is I'll check with Paula. She's the one who decides what physical features what physical things we can use.
We did before, we can do it.
Yeah, I'm sure it won't be a problem, and that would be incredibly helpful going forward.
Any other comments? David, do you have any words as we begin to close down?
Yes. First, I appreciate the enthusiasm that everyone has turned to this task already, and it's clear that there's a real value proposition to what we're pulling together. I would ask that you, wherever you can, and it's been said a couple of times by a couple of folks, leverage work already done. Let's advance the ball and not redo what's already sufficiently been pulled together. Second, the storming and norming within working groups is it's almost an art in and of itself, and I would encourage you all to think about product at the end. What you're producing is a recommendation to the commission, or a set of recommendations to the commission. Now, there will also potentially be value in those recommendations to more than just the commission. I'm sure that NHTSA and Department of Transportation will gain value. Homeland Security will very much want to see what are in the recommendations, and so it will have, I believe, much greater influence than just the commission. Third, scope is going to be an important thing for each of the working groups to grapple with early on. We've laid out a pretty broad plate, and the commissioner was absolutely right to encourage us to what are the things that he'd like to see in the way of answers. There will be more subject material than you can probably provide a depth of credible contribution to. Relatively early on, go through the process of winnowing down, okay, where's the golden work in this particular group? Don't lose those other areas. We will certainly want to turn those into questions for the CISRIC, questions for follow-on bodies. But do focus around deliverables that you'll all be proud of, that will advance the challenge, advance the nation's response to the challenges in a constructive manner. So, Steve, that's really all I have.
Thank you, David. And again, to Paula, thank you for your insight here. And sorry you had to leave us. To David, and to Tim, thank you again collectively. To those of you that are out there on the teleconference in the eye of the storm, in some cases, be safe. For those of you at the table that are going to be flying into the eye of the storm, be safe. I know you're all anxious, as I am, to hear what the grand total is of our collective years of experience. I'll total that up after I talk to I guess it was only Joe or somebody couldn't respond. But I've got one blank here, David, and get that back out to you, because I think we'll all find that to be very, very encouraging that we're working with such a knowledgeable brain trust of 911 experience and insight. So thank you all. Tim, is there a protocol here that we move to adjourn or anything like that?
Not really. You could just say, have a good evening, I think, and we're fine.
Okay, well, have a good afternoon, have a good evening, if you will. If you're staying around, enjoy your time in the Washington area. And I look forward to working with you again and to communicating with you, and as we get together sometime in the spring of the year. Thank you all.